I love that I get to say this at almost every town hall. Hi, Mom and Dad.
That's nice.
This is great. Can someone make sure that this is on my, let me try this, Rep Lisa Reynolds, I can do this. That it's not on my personal page, it's on my Rep Lisa Reynolds page. Not that it matters all that much.
Made says thumbs up.
Okay, great. Okay, hello. Thank you, everybody. We are filtering in. I can picture everyone kind of getting their seats if this were in real life. And I do love that your parents are here, Rep Grayber. They're very devoted audience members. Oh, and Mr. Matt Lass is here. Thank you all for being here. We're just getting settled here in the next 30 seconds or so, and we will get started. We tend to be pretty punctual people. We are recording this, and we are streaming on Facebook Live at Rep Lisa Reynolds, I think Representative Lisa Reynolds' Facebook page. Awesome. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I'm State Representative Lisa Reynolds from Portland's West Side. I'll have my two colleagues introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to Maida for a land acknowledgement. Rep Grayber?
Yes, I'm Dacia Grayber, State Representative, House District 35, currently Tigard and Southwest Portland. And Senator Burdick, your last time introducing at a town hall.
Yes, this will be my last time introducing, and they're forcing me to talk about myself a little later. So, and it's great to see you all. I'm the senator from District 18.
Great. Maida.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you everyone for joining us. As usual, we'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We are seated on the traditional land of the Yali Tualatin, the Wasco Cowlitz Clackamas, the Kalapuya, and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz and Grand Ronde. So as we know, Indigenous people have played a large role in shaping the world that we live in today, so we want to make sure that we acknowledge them before getting started. And then I will also mention the chat is open today, so feel free to message us all any questions. Chelsea Punian from Senator Burdick's office will be moderating the Q&A at the end of the town hall, so you can message her directly with your questions as well. And now I'll turn it back over to Rep Reynolds.
Great. Thank you all. As you know, one of my, the role I've been playing is talking a little bit about an update on COVID. You know, when this all started unfolding now a good 18 months ago, I'm not sure I would have thought I'll still be talking about COVID in October 2021, but here we are. I wanted to give you all a brief update. The good news, and it's a small bit of good news, is that case counts, and I don't have my printer, and of course, this is so low tech, but as you can see, case counts are starting to turn down. But what I want to be clear about, if you look at where we are, sorry guys, I feel so funny. If you look at where we are with hospitalizations, currently is still among the highest we've been since this pandemic started. We are still way above our winter peak of hospitalizations. And if any of you all have been following the Oregonian, the modeling out of OHSU, which has been unbelievably accurate, their predictions have been almost spot on with what we see in real life. It shows that the rate of decline in our hospitalizations is pretty slow, and that even in December, we will still be at a very high rate of hospitalization from COVID. And of course, we'll be at a high rate of hospitalization from all those people who have delayed care, or I mean, delayed sounds voluntary, have not been able to get the care they need because of the overburdened hospitalization from those who are in the hospital because of COVID. Now, we will say this yet again. I know that all of us have been beating this drum for a long time, but the vast majority of people who are hospitalized with COVID and the vast majority of people who are intubated due to COVID and the vast majority of people who die from COVID are unvaccinated. The vaccine is still our most powerful tool to prevent disease and to prevent serious disease and to prevent death. One thing that this Peter Graves out of OHSU, who does this modeling, he feels one of, besides our vaccination rate, which goes up about 1% a week, because I follow it every week, the rising vaccination rate is so slow. That's not why our hospital numbers are coming down. He feels the hospital numbers are coming down in large part due to masking. So it's still really important that we all get our vaccine. It's still really important that we all continue to mask. If you have any questions for me on that, feel free to reach out. And just briefly, just an update. There's not really much of an update on boosters, but as a lot of you know, anyone who is immunocompromised and in a serious way, specifically people who've had they call it solid organ transplants, or who are on very serious immunocompromising medications, can get a booster if their preliminary series was Moderna or Pfizer, and that's 28 days after the second dose of that. That's not what's getting most of the press right now. Most of the press is talking about those who've been vaccinated against Pfizer should get a third dose 6 months after their second dose. And those are for people over 65 and for those in the younger age groups who either have significant health issues or who work or live in high-risk areas such as nursing homes or hospitals. So that's really about all I have on COVID today. We could probably talk about it for the whole hour. I will say it's nice to see that downturn, but we are nowhere near through with this. And nowhere near through with serious disease. One last thing I will say, Peter Graves says right now he feels about 25% of Oregonians are still susceptible from getting COVID. And that includes people who've never had COVID, from people who've had COVID, but their antibodies in response to the initial disease is waning. And then those small percentage of people who've been vaccinated, but are still prone to getting those breakthrough cases. So we still have a huge chunk of our population who are very much at risk of getting COVID. I know there's been some discussion at some point, we're going to reach herd immunity through natural immunity. We're nowhere near that. And I really want to caution all of you who think about natural immunity from the disease. It's very clear you also need a vaccine to provide more significant immunity and protection. And then I wanted to ask Rep. Grayber, who most of you know is a firefighter, is like literally on the front lines, going to people's homes who are in distress. What are you seeing on the literal front lines in terms of COVID cases?
I am still on almost every call that is respiratory call, chest pain, anything that could possibly be COVID, getting in my white hazmat suit and wearing full protection, just because we are not, I think we're seeing a decline of the sickest patients, but we're starting to see some breakthrough cases that do need transport to the hospital, although I have not intubated anyone who's been vaccinated yet. And hopefully that will hold. Continuing to see kind of younger folks. And I think the common refrain I get when we have someone who's like, well, I don't have COVID. It's folks that just don't think that they might be susceptible. And, folks that say, hey, the only place I ever go is church. Or, when I go out only with people who, I know. Well, you think about one person with a group of 10 people, and those 10 people know another 10 people, and it amplifies. So I know we're all tired of this. I know it's exhausting, but just staying the course, making sure that we're vaxxed and masked. I can't even say that fast anymore. And we are going to get through this. I think, as we go back into winter and people are more indoors, I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I'm pleased to see maybe the slightest decline. I don't want to curse this, but slightest decline of the sickest patients.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting. The other thing Peter Graves talks about, the modeler from OHSU, is part of the slower decline in the hospitalizations is, first is the indoors and also what he's calling fatigue. I know we're all tired, but keep up with all you've been doing, masking and vaxxing. And I think, for the most part, if you're surrounding yourself with people who you feel are also putting those precautions in place and they're vaccinated, I think we can fairly safely do some small indoor gatherings, but you absolutely have to know the vaccination status of everyone who comes to your door. And yes, I do wish we had an easier way of proving that, whether we've talked about vaccine passports or proof of vaccination. And I think those might be some questions we get into a little bit later. Thanks for that perspective. I was hoping it'd be a little bit better though, Rep. Grayber. Like, oh, we're done. I think just a whole other thing we could talk about in terms of Rep. Grayber is some of the newer decisions to give you all flak jackets. And that goes back to what really brought Rep. Grayber and me and Senator Burdick together, these 4 or 5 years ago, is our shared commitment to gun violence prevention. And I met Rep. Grayber through Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense, and I met Senator Burdick through that work. And there's definitely a straight through line from my involvement with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense and deciding to run for office and then winning because the moms really helped me. And what on that note, I wanted to take a few minutes to, I'm going out of order here, but it just seems like the right transition. Take a few minutes to turn the floor over to our esteemed Senator Burdick, who's finishing up. I think is it pretty much close to 20? I mean, I think you were elected almost literally 25 years ago. Senator Burdick won her first election to the state Senate in Oregon, and there she's been for 25 years. I was looking up the numbers. There are still only 8 women in the 30-member Oregon Senate. How many women were there when you arrived, Senator Burdick? Oh, she is.
Surprisingly enough, we had, I don't know the exact numbers, but there were more Republican women than there are now when I joined the Senate in 1997, these many years ago. How time passes. And now, we haven't kept up, although this last election cycle, we got some real superstars. Kate Lieber, who had just called me, and Deb Patterson from Salem, a very tough race. She replaced the only Republican woman who was Jackie Winters, who was a dear friend of mine, a moderate Republican, and iconic in her district. So unlike other moderate Republicans, she did not get thrown out like so many of the good ones have.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to ask you a little bit, Senator Burdick, and Rep. Grayber, feel free to jump in. I remember, I think the first time I met you, which was at a Moms Demand Action event, and you talked about gun violence prevention being front and center for you, including way back in your 1995, your first election, or 1996, I guess that would have been your first election. And that was definitely before gun violence prevention was cool. In fact, that's when it was called gun control. I mean, as much as I'm completely devoted to the cause, I'm very conscious of the fact that it's not politically risky, certainly as a Democrat, to be all in on gun violence prevention. But I'm wondering what it was like, back in the 90s.
When I first, it's always annoyed me. I'm not thank heavens, not a victim of gun violence. And my, I grew up in a gun owning family because my family were hunters and in fishermen. So I didn't have a particular motivation that some people have very tragically for getting involved in this movement. But it always had annoyed me that nobody would talk about it. We had all this gun violence happening in Portland at the time, similar to what we're seeing now. And nobody would talk about it. It was like the third rail. And so early on, I said to my steering committee, I'm really annoyed that nobody's talking about it, so I'm going to talk about it. And they said, we quit. We didn't sign up for a losing campaign. And I said, wait a minute, let me try this on the doorstep and I'll report back. And I went door to door and was very open. At that point, it was background checks at gun shows. And the reaction I got from the people in my district was stunning. And that includes a lot of gun owners. And then people would say things like, well, isn't this already the law? Well, that's a no-brainer. Well, you know, you want to take away my guns? Some of the gun owners would say. And I'd say, well, are you a convicted felon? And they'd say no. And I said, well, then you can have your gun. But if you're a convicted felon, I'd sure want to get my hands on that gun. And they'd say, fine, that's fine with me. So I reported back and it became one of my top 3 issues. The other 2 being education and environmental protection. And I said the same thing on every single doorstep. I didn't avoid any doorsteps. If I saw an NRA sticker, I'd still talk about it. And it was, I was a come from behind candidate. I had no, I got in the race kind of late and I had none of the traditional endorsements, no unions, no trial lawyers, no environmentalists even. And my main opponent had all those endorsements, but I was talking about something that people had not been talking about and were ready to talk about. And that's when I realized how out of touch the legislature was with the public on this issue. Because, you know, anytime I had a chance to talk to Republicans, especially Republican women, it was always the same. You know, people really supported it. But I just happened to be the first one to talk about it. And coming from behind with no endorsements, I won in a landslide. And I do believe it was that issue that set me apart. There were other good candidates in the race, but I do believe it was that issue that set me apart. And so I've always felt like my district has my back on this. And there have been rough times. There have been even death threats. There have been, you know, threatening emails and, you know, people stalking through the Capitol with guns and threatening me online and just putting horrible images of me on websites. But my district was always at my back. And I felt that so strongly and I was so grateful for it. So people have told me, well, you had so much courage. Well, it didn't take much courage because we had a whole team, my whole district, working on this. And it's made me, I mean, I think we all take our representation responsibility seriously, but I've always felt I have a special bond with my district partly because of that issue. It's not just that issue. You know, I grew up in this district and I have always felt some of my colleagues, especially my Republican colleagues, kind of have to look over their shoulder when they take personal positions on things. I've never felt that way. And even people who disagree with me in this district, people have been civil and really wanting to engage in a conversation rather than just throw rocks. It's an extraordinary district. And you are so lucky that you have Representative Reynolds and Representative Grayber representing you. It's a very lucky stroke of fate that, not a stroke of fate, good God, they both worked their tails off to get this job. But, and how lucky we are to have a first responder and a medical doctor, especially in these times we're in. And not only a medical doctor, but a medical doctor who can talk about medical things in ways that make sense. So I know you all appreciate Dacia and Lisa, and I certainly do as well. I've been honored to be part of the triumvirate, which is what we modestly call ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for that, Senator Burdick. I did put in the chat that there's a film made by, a prominent local filmmaker called 101 Seconds, and it talks about the Clackamas Town Center shooting, and it actually also has footage from the shooting, so it's a content warning, but it really features the activism that grew out from that, including survivors of the victims in that shooting, and how they worked with Senator Burdick to pass gun violence prevention work. So it's a really just shows Senator Burdick's tenacious courage and warmth for sure around this issue. I was just wondering if Senator Burdick, if you wanted to share with us some of your favorite moments in the Oregon Senate, maybe your not so favorite moments, what you're going to miss, what you're going to not miss, just a few small questions, but just would, if you can put it all in a nutshell. I'm curious how you're feeling these days.
My favorite moments really are those times when you have a legislative miracle. You might be working on something for years, and all of a sudden things come together in a way that kind of defies politics. And one of those miracles was actually in 2017, when I actually, given the partisan divides that we have these days, this is very rare, but I actually had a Republican sponsor, chief co-sponsor with me on the red flag gun safety law. Another miracle that we had was when we had a meth epidemic back in the early 2000s. We set up a work group with 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and that's when we got we increased funding for drug courts, and we required prescriptions for pseudoephedrine, which some of my constituents were not happy until I talked to them and told them about the experience of children when a meth lab is going on. And it was, people really understood that we had to, that requirement has been lightened up considerably in the last session. But at the time, we had a meth lab epidemic in Oregon, and it was ended. It was absolutely ended with that one step of requiring prescriptions for pseudoephedrine. This is a long time ago, but there was a word called smurfing, where people would, meth cooks would go into stores and buy up all their pseudoephedrine and make them in home meth labs, which were terribly toxic. They would have to be completely, some places would have to be torn down. They were so toxic. And it would cost, there was one study that said the cost of the meth epidemic, with all the costs included, the cleanup, the foster care for kids who were taken out of those homes, you add it all up, and it was about $400 some per household in Multnomah County. And so we achieved that with myself and then Representative Greg McPherson, and then 2 of the most conservative Republicans in the legislature, Representative Wayne Krieger and Senator Roger Byer. And the 4 of us hammered out this package that ended meth labs. It's probably, one of the really fun things about working at the state level as opposed to Congress is you can actually see your results. And that was probably the most extreme immediate result. I know that lives have been saved for the work that Dacia and Lisa and I have done on gun violence, but it's hard to quantify somebody who didn't die. We know they're there, but in this case with the meth package, we know that we had immediate results. And there were other things that we did, some of the tax reforms, sunsetting all the tax credits. Just to go back, I've chaired several committees, including Judiciary. That was when we did the meth package, and Finance and Revenue. And we actually achieved some forms of tax reform, including in this last session, to basically put the tax system back into being more progressive than it had been. And sunsetting the tax credits. It was really hard to get rid of tax credits before, and now it's much easier. So there were very difficult things, but the rewarding thing to me is the way I ran my committee we really put the partisanship aside, and we were able to achieve some pretty good results. The Indoor Clean Air Act came out of my committee, banning, smoking in bars and restaurants, and practically everywhere. And so it was a very, those were the highlights. The lowlights for me is just the general. I'm an impatient person. When you see that, and with the help of my district, I said, wait a minute, my district and I get this. What's wrong with you people? And so some things are so obvious, like mandatory coverage of contraceptives, for example. It took 10 years to achieve that. And it shouldn't have taken more than one session. And so the slowness of the process sometimes, and the fact that things have to ripen before you can really get them through was a constant frustration. But you just keep at it because you eventually get the results. And of course, the increasing partisanship is, everyone knows about that one. It's been very hard. I've navigated around it, I think, probably as well as anyone, but it's still much more extreme than when I got there.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that Daisy and I kind of were in the middle of that with redistricting, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But thank you so much for that. And, I know you're still around, and certainly Daisy and I will have you on speed dial, just for the record. Speaking of trailblazing, I definitely consider you a trailblazer. Not a professional basketball player, but I'm sure you could do that too. I really consider my colleague, Representative Daisy Grayber, a trailblazer. And that has really come to the forefront in this past few weeks. She and TV, FNR, and what are the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue? I think I got that. We're featured on NBC specifically around issues for women in firefighting. And Daisy, I was wondering if you could share your story and your journey a little bit. And then I know you were also recently at a conference. I know you've helped provide leadership and mentorship to young women interested in the field. So turning it over to my colleague, Daisy.
I can talk a little bit on that. I definitely am not a basketball trailblazer. My parents are on here and they can confirm that while I was tall and I was fast, everybody wanted me to come out and play basketball, but I never actually made a basket. So I spent a lot of not my forte. However, trailblazing with firefighting. So I have been a firefighter paramedic for over 20 years now. And I've seen so many changes. Two of the departments I've been at, I started as part-time volunteer, and then my first paid department was in 2006. And I was one of the first women in both of those. So that has changed. And when I came to TVFNR, there were 13 or 14 of us, and now we have over 30. So those efforts, I think, are just really increasing as we bring more women into the field. Because when you think of a firefighter, a lot of folks, they think of what they see all the time. And that's something that we've reinforced when we bring women into schools to do outreach to students on what they can be. But so part of, we talked about gun violence prevention being inspired by the work that we've done in our careers. And that certainly was what brought me to politics. It's actually some of the things I've seen as a firefighter that have brought me into this sphere as well. And as far as bringing more women, as we had a really exciting package, a bill that didn't pass, but then we got the funding for it in the Christmas tree package in 2021. And that was $6 million for apprenticeships for firefighters. So professionalized paid apprenticeship programs. And the base of that being that 50% of those will be women and people from historically underrepresented communities in the fire service. So communities of color, traditional non-English speakers as a first language. It's really exciting. So now that we're building all of this, we have to provide care for folks. So one of the things that NBC News contacted me about, they talked to Congresswoman Bonamici and she said, oh, I know this female firefighter and she's doing all this work in this space and she's working on healthcare issues. So little known fact, and this is going to kind of blow people's minds, we do have presumptive cancer laws that we fought very hard for. I know Senator Burdick was part of that fight for our firefighters. We were one of the first states in the nation to do that. However, if you are, oh, sorry.
Can you explain what presumptive cancer laws
Yeah,
are?
so firefighters have a much, much higher prevalence of contracting cancer. Anyone that knows my story know that my husband and I went through this just a few short years ago. He had job-related throat cancer. So they fought, there were laws originally, if you were harmed as a result of a cancer that was likely job-related, you weren't covered, you were on your own. And as anyone who's been through this horrific experience knows, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, often resulted in disability and death. So the fight was to make sure that if our firefighters contracted cancer as a result of job exposure, they had legal coverage to provide for medical retirement and disability. So we fought for that. So currently, if you are a male firefighter and you have a reproductive cancer, you have testicular cancer, you are covered. You are part of that presumptive cancer. If you are a female firefighter or someone who's non-binary or who has female reproductive organs and you have any cancer below the breasts, you are not covered. So cervical, ovarian, and you'd think that's kind of a no-brainer, like, what? Well, we should fix that. I am really excited. Senator Lieber is partnering with this on me, and we are bringing this bill forward in the short session to fix that. But anytime you have a bill that kind of bumps up against insurance, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I'm looking forward to that. I know Devin dropped in the chat that video that NBC came out and did. I'm very proud. I am also the oldest backseat firefighter, so female on a nozzle in the backseat in the metro area. And the person pulling the hose and throwing the ladders, that's me. That was not a humble brag at all. So thanks. Thank you so much, Rep. Reynolds.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great piece. And, you know, following Daisy on her social media, she really does amplify these really important issues that, you know, if you're not a firefighter, you don't necessarily think about. I would like to just spend a few minutes talking about redistricting. And then we'll go straight to our question and answer period. I also want to leave a minute for, you know, what happens now that our esteemed state senator, Jenny Burdick, is stepping down from, she's not retiring from public service, thankfully, but she is stepping down from the Senate. We'll talk about what that process is going to look like. I think I'll let Senator Burdick explain that. But I think just briefly, for those of you who are kind of like the insider baseball kind of nerdy stuff of the state legislature, we had what's called a special session, started on Monday, September 20th and completed on Monday, September 27th. And it was to fulfill our constitutional duty to reapportion voters into legislative districts and congressional districts. So just briefly, every 10 years, we recount everyone. That was the census that happened in 2020. When we get the results of that census, we find that, you know, for example, my current district, House District 36, had grown by 5 or 6%. Other districts were a little bit smaller, so we have to kind of shuffle people around so that we have similar number of constituents in each district, and more importantly, that a district doesn't divide up communities with a common interest. So this is a really short explanation for what has been a very long and tedious process. And long story short, we were able to pass both state legislative maps, so state House and state Senate maps, and then U.S. congressional maps, including 6th District. We got a new U.S. congressional member from Oregon for the first time in 40 years. So it was a difficult process. I don't think we need to go into it too much. Again, it's a little bit insider baseball. I think Daisy and I have some stories we could share maybe over a cup of coffee one day. But I just wanted to make sure we address that because that has been a big thing in the news recently. Senator, and if questions come up, which I suspect they will, we will address those in our question and answer period, which is starting up here pretty soon. Senator Burdick, who's going to be our senator now?
It will be a process. We've been through this before.
That's true.
Because we're far out from election, there won't be a special election or anything like that. But we will the process is for the precinct committee people, the Democratic precinct people in Multnomah County and in Washington County will submit 3 to 5 candidates to the commission. And I believe it's a combined 3 to 5 candidates from the district that are picked to submit to the county commissioners in Multnomah and Washington County. And the district, as it's now configured, and it's very different in redistricting, I'll get to that in a minute. But the district, as it's currently configured, is about 2/3 Multnomah County and 1/3 Washington County. And so the decision will be weighted because the county commissioners, when they get this group of 3 to 5 people, will agree on someone to take the appointment. And then that person will have to run to hold the seat in 2022, in next year. And so, you know, it's there's been at least one person who's stepped forward, but this was before redistricting. So I don't know, you know, how the redistricting is going to affect who goes after the seat, because the redistricting itself, the new map, moved Senate District 18 way over into Washington County. So if all of you are constituents now, none of you will be constituents of District 18 as of January 2023. So what will happen is you will be represented, and you're very, very lucky because there are 3 people. Well, Tigard is a different story, but for the Multnomah County part of the district, you will be represented either by Senator Kate Lieber in District 14, or Elizabeth Steiner Hayward in District 17, or Senator Rob Wagner in District 19. And so all 3 of those, if I had to pick people, since I couldn't get Dacia or Lisa, if I had to pick members of my colleagues that I felt could give my district the representation it deserves, those are the 3 I would have picked. Tigard is a little bit different situation. It's been moved into another district, which is not represented by those 3. And so I think it's a bit of a mystery where that one will go.
Yeah, it's all a little bit complicated. There's still a lot of dust settling, and I know some people have asked specifically what I will be doing. We're still figuring that all out, but thank you so much. Great. So I think, yeah, long story short, there will be, you know, the convention and appointment process in November. It has to be within 30 days of Senator Burdick's last day, which is November 1st. Chelsea, are we ready for Q&A?
Rep Reynolds, I just want
Yes.
to point out too, for folks who I've gotten a couple direct messages like, oh my gosh, who's my rep in Tigard? That's still me. It's still me until the 2022 election. It doesn't change my focus. I'm very grateful to live where I do, and you know, I plan on continuing to run and serve. Tigard, the redistricting process was really incredible. There's a lot of feedback, and as a result, Tigard came out kind of whole. So it's a city of 55,000 that's mostly encompassed in a new open legislative district. I can't do campaign stumping right now, but I'm pretty excited about people that have stepped up to run. I think it's going to be wonderful, but I keep saying I'm not dead yet. I'm still your rep. I'm in there, and I'm excited to represent Tigard all the way to the end. I'll be at a rally at Woodspring Apartments on Saturday to talk about affordable housing. You're going to continue. I joked with the mayor, you're not going to get rid of me that easily. Tigard is part of my community, and I'm very excited about it. So
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, redistricting doesn't even happen until, won't happen until 2023. And Daisy and I will, combined under who will be Senator Burdick's replacement, are here to form Triumvirate Part 2. It'll be a pale comparison. No, so we are excited to continue doing the really important work of our combined sister districts under a new state senator.
Yeah, I should have actually said that in my presentation. The way it works is those people who are in districts now will, all of us will continue, except for me who's leaving, but Dacia and Lisa and all the rest of the legislators and senators will continue to serve in their current districts until January of 22. And so if they want to, some of them will be moving. And so in order to continue representing their new district, they have to run in 2022.
Great, thank you for that. Chelsea, take it away.
Yeah, you guys answered some of the questions about redistricting. There were some, wait, who's my senator? Who's my rep? Senator Burdick, I just wanted to start off. Some people might not know actually what your next steps are. We got some questions that people saw that you were on, your term ended in 2025. So they were wondering what next steps were for you. I had assumed everyone knew, but just wanted to give you that chance.
Oh, thank you. Just very quickly, I'll be one of two counselors from Oregon for the Northwest Power Planning Council. So it will kind of go back to my previous experience in energy, and I'm looking forward. It's going to be a good change. Of course, I'll miss the Senate, and most of all, I'll miss all of you. But it's a great challenge. I'm grateful to the governor for appointing me to this job, and I'm looking forward to serving in that capacity.
And, great to have your background and your, commitment to, environmental policy as part of that. So that's awesome.
Great. The next question that we got was, it might actually be for you, Rep Reynolds, but feel free to chime in, Rep Grayber. It's about nursing homes being allowed to call 911 for minor medical issues. Either one of you want to take that one?
Well, I'm going to jump in on that one. That is what we affectionately call baby's first time on the front page of the Oregonian in my team. So that was an article that was written on a bill that was incredibly bipartisan. We only had 2 no votes on it in the House. That's basically going to use fines from long-term nursing care facilities to basically fund an exploratory group on how we are more efficient. Now, this could take up the rest of the 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to do this really quick. But the problem is we have lots of long-term care facilities, and their go-to is to call 911 for minor medical emergencies, such as folks that fall down. In some cases, that's become an abusive practice where different fire departments are going 3, 4, 5 times a night because they aren't attending to things. That's not the same in every care facility, and there's been a lot moving in. Now, that brings up a much bigger issue about staffing and effective staffing. So zoom ahead, there was a city that put forward basically a fine structure on this and leveraged a fine. And what they were finding, what the long-term care facilities were doing, was no longer calling. So if grandma fell down, they were like, oh no, we're going to incur a fine on this. We're not going to call 911. And there were cases where people were then becoming injured. So there is a balance to be had. And this bill emphasizes that it is a collaborative space where we're working, where we're not putting, some folks were like, well, this is limiting the abilities of cities to sue. The idea is to center our patients and center our emergency services, but really it's about what is best for the seniors in those facilities. So I think it's going to be a triad of better staffing issues, proper use of 911, and some real creativity in how we approach those things. So I am happy to continue this offline. I know there's a lot of questions about it. I did not realize I was going to be on the front page of the Oregonian, and at 7:14, as soon as it dropped, my phone started blowing up. So please, I'm not sure who asked that question, but I would love to continue the conversation offline.
Yeah, and we can put our email addresses in the chat. And I will just say this partly touches on what so many of us have been in so many meetings about, which is our tremendous workforce shortage in, in all sorts of medical fields. And that was a problem before COVID, but has been laid completely bare by COVID. And I'm sure you all have seen just news story after news story, partly burnout because of the current crisis in hospitals. Thank you.
Great. Moving along to the next question. It's kind of two questions about what the future of maybe providing proof of vaccination to indoor eat or attend events indoors, as well as vaccination proof for kids age 12 to 18 in schools. Any thoughts on that or anything you'd like to remark?
I will say, I do think it's a little clunky here in Oregon to show proof of vaccination. I actually did go to an indoor event where we did have to show proof of vaccination along with an ID. So I was really happy, and everyone was masked, but I was really happy at that degree of scrutiny, like checking my ID, but it was still like a photo on my phone, and I'm like, I wish it were something that felt a photo on my phone of my vaccine card. I wish it were something a little more, kind of legit. And there are other states that do have this, like New York and California have ways to bring up your proof of vaccination as a QR code. This is something that I know has been discussed here in Oregon. As far as I know, no decisions have been made. If anyone knows something differently on that. But we do know that vaccine mandates work, both in getting more people vaccinated, and they also work in that we know if those of us who are vaccinated, spend as little time as possible among the unvaccinated, our chance of breakthrough cases goes way down. So vaccine mandates work. I'm a big fan. The idea of a vaccine mandate for those 12 and older in public schools, which has been what Governor Newsom is proposing in California, is something that is very interesting to me and I think is really important. I want to be very, very careful about doing everything that we possibly can to keep students safe, but also to keep students in school. So these are definitely difficult conversations, but super important to have in this public health crisis.
Great. I just wanted to put a comment out to everyone if they hadn't seen it. Patty in the chat wanted to give a congrats to the AAPI, the Asian American Pacific Islander Oregonians. They're 94% vaccinated. I thought that was just a great statistic and I wanted to give it a shout out. The next question, I'm going to shift back to redistricting. We had someone who wanted to get more specifics on how the present district lines have been shifted for the new districts. If that's something that we can share the map with, or if there's any more you could go into on the redistricting process.
Yeah, I think Maida put the links to the maps. I have to be totally honest, they're not super user friendly. I think and I don't mean to be, I don't know why I'm dominating. I think that as these maps become finalized, there'll be more friendly versions of manipulating them. Dacia, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to add that this really was, I'm sure you've seen a lot of media over redistricting, and there's a couple of things here. I'm so proud that we were the first state in the nation to get this done, and that there were over 22 meetings and over 2,000 pieces of public comment. I know from the Tigard area, I would say I'm going to brag and say we were 25% of those, but I don't know. As state representatives, we have to be incredibly careful about what we can't advocate for or against lines. We can't say, hey, I live here, keep me in Tigard. That is not something that happened at all. So this was taken in, there were two maps, as folks know, they were voted on in the legislature. The Congress maps were changed just a little bit, and those versions are going to be undergoing a legal challenge as well. And then at the end of this, we will have our new lines, and hopefully they will have the same sort of interactive platform that we did when we went through the redistricting process. I hope that provides a little more clarity for folks, but I can tell just for the area that is now House District 35, that was one that saw a pretty big change the numbers changed everywhere. So I have been getting some folks going, oh no, I'm in House District 27, or I'm in House District, like, no, you're still in House District 35 until January of 2022. And for this area, Tigard did become its own kind of district, and that will be House District 25, Southwest Portland, north of there, from basically the North Tigard line all the way up to Highway 26, including PSU and OHSU, all the way over to Garden Home and West Slope. That became a new House District 28, with 27 next to that. 33 is stacked north of 28. It requires a little map reading and a lot of patience. So we'll continue to put information out on that.
Great. And Rep. Grayber, you meant January 2023, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, so I need to, oh no, you didn't hear? We're moving. No, definitely January 2023.
Great. And then we received a question, if anyone would like to comment on Texas Senate Bill 8, the abortion bill, and if the Biden administration's return of federal funding on clinics that may provide abortion referrals.
Let me intervene here. I just saw a bulletin on my phone that a judge has temporarily suspended the law in Texas. Yay. So, and I haven't, obviously I've been here, I haven't read the story, but it was just a blurb that came through about 5 times. So that's good news. I think the future of Roe versus Wade is very tenuous right now, but at least temporarily, this is for those poor women who are suffering in Texas right now. At least it's some good news for them.
And thank you for that link, Ariel. Yeah, for those of you, Senate Bill 8 in Texas bans abortion after 6 weeks, which is often before many women know they're pregnant. And there's some particularly repugnant parts of this. And I think that's why a little over a year ago, when I see someone referring to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when RBG died, I think a lot of us were fearing this moment. A lot of us were fearing this moment when Kavanaugh was elevated to the bench, and a lot of us feared this moment when Trump was elected. So we, it's pretty scary, but we are working really hard. I know in Oregon we have, the best reproductive rights bill in the country, and we will never go back. And we will become a beacon for those who need to come here for reproductive services. And we will all work very hard to do everything we can to keep the whole spectrum of reproductive health legal, accessible, and safe. I'm a provider of reproductive health care to my adolescent patients. So I feel very strongly about this, and I know my colleagues here do. I'm sure Daisy has a few words to say on this as well.
So when Texas passed that law, we were at dinner with our kids at home, and I said, you guys, I will go to jail over this. I looked at my daughter. I remember being a teenager and going with my Nana to protest for pro-choice. And I can't believe that we're still doing this, and I'm 46, and we have got to hold that right sacred. I refuse to live in the future that looks like The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. And I think we leave everything on the table for this, everything.
Yeah, no question. Would you all, maybe Daisy and I can talk, I was gonna say, should we all talk about our short session bills for a minute?
That was going to be my next question, and I was going to have to say, Senator Burdick, you got to sit this one out. So,
dang. Well, as those who know me, and as we've alluded to several times tonight, my work in activism got started in the gun violence prevention movement, and so I am looking to bring forward closing the Charleston loophole, which is a loophole in the background check system, which allows people to actually be able to purchase and leave, and put their hands on guns, even if they haven't passed a background check. We're also looking at maybe combining that with a ghost guns bill. I'll have to talk to you about that, Senator Burdick, which is really banning the use of 3D printed guns, which are not only, you can actually have a gun in your hand without passing a background check, but they don't have a serial number. And they also, since they're plastic, they can go through metal detectors. So lots of important gun violence prevention work. And I have a few other bills that I'm still figuring out right now.
And as I mentioned earlier, so just for folks that aren't familiar with the way the sessions work, we have a long session, which we just completed, that's almost 6 months. And then the short session is this super compressed 5 weeks. So generally the thought is, the great sweeping changes that we all want to pass forward, those tend to not happen in the short session unless those are bills that have been really worked collaboratively and maybe just didn't get over the line. So my bills for the short session are a little, I'm not trying to pass sweeping wildfire policy or totally rebuild the Department of Emergency Management. Been there, done that. I'm still so excited about that. Still gives me chills. So for the short session, I am bringing that cancer bill, that female firefighter cancer bill, and then one that would probably take the next 10 minutes to explain, but it's basically another bill in the workers' compensation space to protect injured workers. Look forward to more information about that. We're still putting together a few pieces to make sure that we're able to actually run it this session.
Great, thanks. Thank you. I think I would love to. This is my mug that lists all of us on it, the state legislators of the 81st Legislative Assembly. I would just love to give a toast to my mentor. Now I consider her a friend and colleague, Senator Burdick. I know that, as I said, you are not going far. I know Daisy and I will be reaching out to you with questions and advice and working across the aisle and passing just more and more gun violence prevention legislation, among other things. But really grateful to have overlapped with you just one short year in the legislature, although we've been comrades in such important legislation for several years. So really, really glad to have had this evening with you and look forward to maybe some socializing sometime in the near future.
Oh, I'm in for that. And my phone is always open to you and Dacia and all of you.
I go off mute. Cheers to you and so many years of service and continued service for our state. I'm excited to see what you're going to do on the advisory board as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you all for being absolutely the best constituents in Oregon. And I really mean that.
Great. Thank you all for spending part of your Wednesday evening with us. I know that Rep. Grayber and I both have some more public events coming this fall. Stay tuned on our social media, read our newsletters, and we look forward to seeing you all back in this space before too long. Take care.